You ever watch your whole life burn down, slow enough to feel every crack? I'm James Porter. 2 months ago, I had a wife I trusted, a best friend I'd take a bullet for, and a house I built with my own hands. Then one rain-soaked Tuesday in Oregon, I walked in on them, together, in my bed. She didn't even look sorry. He didn't even stop. Now I'm here, broke, sleeping in a motel that smells like wet smoke and lost dreams. That's when I found it. An old leather suitcase under the bed, tagged with my name in handwriting I hadn't seen since my Uncle Henry's funeral. Inside, $70,000, a one-way ticket to Portland, and a note. Don't trust Laura, don't trust Ryan. Whatever Henry was warning me about, it's bigger than betrayal. Stick around, hit subscribe. This is where my real story begins. Before it broke, my life looked like something you'd see in a hardware store ad. A 3-bedroom in Eugene with a maple in the front yard. Sundays meant the Seahawks on TV, cheap beer sweating on the coffee table, and Ryan yelling at the screen like he owned the playbook. Summers were backyard smoke, steaks hissing on the grill, Laura laughing in a way that made the neighbors glance over the fence and smile. I worked days as a project manager, wore a high-vis vest, came home with the kind of tired that feels honest. Ryan and I were brothers without paperwork. Helped each other move, fix fences, pour concrete. He knew our alarm code. He had a spare key. That felt normal back then. In our world, tools and trust changed hands without ceremony. Sometimes I'd get home late and find a cooler on the porch, lid frosted, note in his chicken scratch. For the game. There was only one pebble in the shoe. I never remembered giving him that key. Maybe I did during the deck remodel. Maybe I forgot. You make little trades like that in a marriage, in a friendship. You chalk things up to comfort. A man can ignore a hairline crack if the paint still shines. I did. The answer to why he needed that key pulled into my driveway on a rain-soaked Tuesday. Ryan's truck sat in my spot like it paid rent. Raindrops ticked on the hood, slow and steady, a metronome for something I didn't want to name. Inside, the house was too quiet downstairs, the kind of quiet that hums. Then I heard it. A laugh from the bedroom. Hers. Another laugh. His. Laid over it. Low and familiar. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, hand on the rail, and felt my chest tighten like a belt one notch too far. Halfway up, I could smell Laura's shampoo, citrus and heat. The door was cracked. The light was on. Time thinned out, elastic and cruel. I pushed it open. They were tangled in my sheets, our sheets. The ones we bought on a Labor Day sale because she wanted something soft. Ryan didn't scramble. Laura didn't even look surprised, just irritated, like I'd walked into a meeting without knocking. "We didn't want you to find out like this," she said. Not sorry, not ashamed, just logistics. I didn't slam, shout, or throw. I turned, walked downstairs, and picked up my keys the way a ghost might pick up chains. In the hallway mirror, I caught a stranger's eyes, mine, gone flat as winter asphalt. Some betrayal's roar. Mine whispered, "Your life is not your own." And it was just getting started. Restructuring. That's what they called it when my boss wouldn't meet my eyes and slid the envelope across the desk. 2 weeks after I caught them, my badge stopped working and my inbox went dark like a house after midnight. I boxed my life in 30 minutes. Coffee mug, tape measure, a photo of Laura at Cannon Beach, and walked past men who suddenly found their keyboards fascinating. Outside, the rain felt personal. Court was worse. The room smelled like old books and lemon cleaner, the kind of place that makes you instinctively lower your voice. Laura cried with a precision I'd never seen at home. Ryan wore a tie I'd bought him for a wedding, and testified in a tone that said, "I care," like we weren't burning 12 years on the stand. When my lawyer asked about access to our house, the judge frowned as if we'd wasted his lunch break. They said I'd been controlling, uncommunicative, unstable since the job loss. They called it concern, and the court wrote it down as fact. The house went her way, the car, her way, half my retirement, hers. I watched numbers delete a decade. When I tried to speak, just to say I wasn't a monster, I was a man who'd been blindsided. The judge leaned in and said, "Keep emotions out of this, Mr. Porter." I swallowed whatever I had left and nodded. Outside, the courthouse steps were slick. I didn't slip. Something in me already had. Crossroads Motel, room 14. Weekly rate taped behind cracked plexiglass. The neon outside stuttered like it was tired of lying. I learned prices by heart. $2 ramen from the vending machine, 99-cent coffee that tasted like metal. The AC coughed. The bed groaned. Rain drummed the window like fingers on a steering wheel, patient and bored. My phone lit up with names I used to know. I typed and deleted until the screen went gray. Seen. No reply. People love you until loving you requires calories. I stopped asking. I lay there counting ceiling stains and lies I'd believed. Every hour had an echo. I started keeping small records, meals, miles, job applications, rejections. A man without a map needs a ledger. I wrote with a carpenter's pencil because it doesn't snap easy. Nights, I stared at the door and listened for footsteps that were never mine. Mornings, I shaved with cold water and told the mirror to keep quiet. From the front desk, Rita slid me a receipt with a stapled corner and said nothing. I folded it into my wallet behind my old insurance card. Proof, not for taxes, for memory, for proof that rock bottom isn't a metaphor you throw around at bars. It has an address, a smell, a rate. I pressed the receipt flat, let the paper bite my thumb, and thought, if this is the floor, I'll learn it well enough to push off. The charger slipped under the bed, and my hand hit leather. I dragged out a beat-up suitcase, brown with brass corners, the kind you see in black and white photos. A paper tag dangled from twine. James Porter, written in a hand I hadn't seen since we buried my Uncle Henry. My throat went dry. I flipped it over, felt plastic crinkle. Someone had taped a tiny key beneath the frame like a secret you're supposed to earn. The lock gave way. Inside, rubber-banded stacks, bills that smelled like damp basements and old books. 70,000. I counted without trusting my own eyes. Under the cash, a one-way ticket to PDX, 2 days out. Beneath that, a yellow note in that same steady hand, an address in Portland, a time, a warning. The paper shook in my fingers and I realized it was me shaking. Henry was supposed to be the paranoid one, but his words landed like a nail gun. Don't trust Laura, don't trust Ryan, this is travel money. The real fortune waits at this address. I kept reading because I had to. One last line, angled hard into the margin, the kind of sentence a dying man writes when he's out of time. Finish what your mother started before they silenced her. The room went quiet in a new way. Not empty, loaded. I folded the note, slid it into my wallet behind the motel receipt, and felt a door open I didn't know existed. My mother's name was Catherine Porter. She balanced ledgers for Meridian Biotech, the kind of accountant who could find a penny in a hayfield and ask why the hay looked wrong. She drove careful, carried checklists, kept receipts like trophies. The year she died, she kept working late, sipping burnt coffee, underlining things in red that nobody else seemed to see. They said she fell asleep at the wheel. Country road outside Salem, wet as a dish sink. The report used words like inclement and likely. Her sedan wrapped a maple and never unwrapped. I remember the tow lot. Windshield caved, front seat buckled, her scarf still threaded through the seatbelt like she meant to come back for it. Everyone told me to let it go. Accidents happen. Rain is rain. But Henry didn't let it go. He fought with the coroner, the insurance, anyone who'd listen. He mailed me clippings and questions I didn't want. I called it grief. He called it math. We stopped calling much at all. Now his suitcase sat open on my bed like a witness, and his note sat hot in my wallet like a brand. If he was right about Laura and Ryan, what else was he right about? What if my mother didn't fall asleep? What if someone tucked her in? The thought hit like cold water to the face. I looked at the PDX ticket, then at the rain beating my window, steady as a clock, and knew exactly what the next hour of my life was for. The ticket was cheap and one way. That suited me. I kept the suitcase close enough to bruise my leg, fingers on the handle like it might try to leave. Henry's words wouldn't shut up. Don't trust anyone. Not the airline clerk with the polite smile, not the man eyeing my bag, not even the version of me that wanted to believe this was just grief wearing a mask. Portland met me with Pacific Northwest rain, the kind that doesn't fall. It settles into your jacket, your bones, your head. I rented the smallest car on the lot, a rattle in the dash like loose change. The wipers dragged a tired arc. I drove with that motel receipt in my wallet and the note heating my back pocket like a live coal. I kept a silent countdown in my head. 1 hour to the address, 40 minutes, 30. Every green light felt suspect. Every red truck looked like Ryan's from the rear view. The city thinned into wet trees and careful lawns, mailboxes shaped like trout or tiny barns. Suburbia with its smile fixed too hard. When the GPS finally said, "Turn right," I did. The voice dropped me at the end of a cul-de-sac where the houses knew how to behave, except for one. The lawn was a wild beard. The windows were blank. The driveway was cracked like dry knuckles. The map chirped, "Arrived." The silence said, "Prove it." Waist-high weeds slashed rain at my jeans. The porch had a soft spot that remembered every step Henry ever took. The front door was locked, but the suitcase had more to say, an envelope marked "House" tucked beneath the cash. The key slid home like it had been waiting for me. Inside smelled like paper and dust and old coffee. Not dirty, preserved. Books walling in the living room. File cabinets where a couch should be. The kitchen sink dry, mug still parked upside down on a towel like he'd planned to make one more cup and then didn't. I ran a hand along the spines of binders labeled in neat block letters. Meridian, audits, contracts, expenses, 2016, 2017, 2018. A lifetime of paranoia lined up like soldiers. The air hummed with quiet purpose, the kind accountants understand and criminals fear. On the dining table lay a yellow legal pad, Henry's handwriting marching across it. My name, dates, a short list of rules. Keep originals cold, write everything twice, trust the math. Then a final line, underlined until the paper tore. Shed, an arrow inked so hard it dented the wood beneath. Rain pressed the windows like curious strangers. I looked at the back door and felt the floor tilt, not with fear exactly, more like recognition. If the house held questions, the shed held the answers he died chasing. I followed the arrow. The shed door fought me like it belonged to someone else. A new padlock hung there, shiny against rotten wood, the only honest thing on the property. Inside, a tarp draped over a workbench like a shroud. The rain softened on the roof, steady as breathing. I pulled the tarp and found a trap door, hinges newer than the nails around them. Henry didn't trust the house. He trusted depth. I lifted the hatch. Cold air rose up, clean and mechanical, not the smell of dirt, controlled. A steel ladder went down into shadow. I took each rung slow, counting them without meaning to. At the bottom, a single LED strip washed the room in winter light, sharp, unforgiving. Files, binders, photographs sealed in plastic. And against the far wall, a metal cabinet with drawers that bit when you pulled. Inside those drawers, old cassette tapes, labeled in block letters that didn't shake. Dates, meetings, names. I traced the spines with my finger until I hit the one that stripped the room of sound. Moss, Ryan, Laura. My hand hovered, then closed. The label cut into my thumb like a truth you can't smooth over. I glanced at the ladder, at the door above, at the cheap car outside and the life I'd driven herein. I slid the tape free. The plastic clicked in my palm like a trigger finding its groove. The player coughed, then the hiss found its level. Static, a chair scrape, paper. A man's voice came on, measured, expensive, the kind that never needs to shout. Richard Moss, CEO voice even when nobody's watching. "Car accidents happen," he said, and the phrase was so casual I almost missed the violence inside it. Another voice answered, older, greasy with confidence. Logistics about routes, weather, headlights, how rain erases more than footprints. Pages turned. Names were careful until they weren't. He said my mother's full name the way you'd read a serial number. Catherine Porter. They talked about timing, about risk, about approvals worth billions, about Meridian being too exposed if certain documents surfaced. They discussed who might leak, who might suspect, and which investigators could be steered. The room I stood in shrank to a point. Then a voice I knew like my own shadow. Ryan. Calm, team player smooth. "She keeps things from the family. We can try to contain through the sun. Contain through the sun. Every word landed like a hammer on the same nail. My jaw locked so hard my ears rang. Upstairs, rain drummed the roof like knuckles on a door from another life. Moss again, decisive. If containment fails, we make sure it looks like what it is every winter in Oregon, a sleepy road and a bad night. The tape clicked on, indifferent. My hands weren't. They were already building something new out of the wreck, anger with edges, grief with a spine. I started pulling plastic sleeves from a binder, hands steadier than my head. First page, a banner, Meridian Annual Summit, hung in some beige hotel ballroom. Second page, a photo that tightened the room to a pinhole. My mother in the center, professional smile, shoulders squared. On her left, Laura, younger, hair darker, eyes already measuring a room. On her right, Ryan, tie loose, the same grin he wore at my barbecue. At the bottom edge, a timestamp, 2 years before my wedding. There were name tags: Catherine Porter, accounts; Laura Harris, marketing assistant; Ryan Blake, contractor. Whoever took it used a film camera, the kind that doesn't lie unless a liar frames it. I remember our first date, Laura calling it fate. I remember Ryan saying he felt like he'd known her forever. They weren't lying. They were quoting the plan. Fate's cheaper when you storyboard it. I flipped through more. Coffee breaks, breakout sessions, smiles sharpened to points. The myth of how we met cracked like safety glass, still holding shape, already shattered. If they stood shoulder to shoulder with my mother before I'd ever kissed Laura, then my marriage was a long con with cake. I set the photo down and said it out loud so it couldn't crawl back into doubt. That meet cute was staged. And once you accept that, you stop playing by the script. I found the laptop under a stack of ledgers, battery half full like it had been waiting. A single file sat on the desktop, named in big, clear letters, for James. When Henry's face filled the screen, he looked thin, paper skin on steel bones, but his eyes were bright, the kind that don't beg the truth. They drag it out by the throat. James, he said, and my name landed like a hand on the shoulder. They will call me paranoid. Good. Paranoia keeps records. He explained a trust in my name, structured to survive lawyers and hurricanes. He said the number the banker whispered like a sin, $14 million, wasn't luck. It was the interest on courage and time. Then he laid out the fork in the road without romance. You can fight or you can disappear. One choice buys sleep. The other buys a world where men like Moss don't get to make rain look like mercy. He coughed, smiled crooked, leaned closer. Your mother wasn't perfect. She was brave. Finish what she started. The video ended on his breath catching and steadied itself into silence. I stared at my own reflection in the black screen until the man looking back stopped flinching. I slid the laptop into the suitcase and said at once, to Henry, to myself, to the house that knew us both, I fight. Directory, automated voice. For financial crimes, press 3. I pressed. Another menu. Wealth management, records, or tips. I hit records and waited, the suitcase against my shin like a dog that wouldn't leave. A woman picked up, calm, clipped. Torres. I told her my name, my mother's, my uncle's, and one sentence I never thought I'd say. I have tapes with a CEO discussing a fatal crash like it was weather. Silence. 3 seconds long enough to feel like a test. Then, where are you, Mr. Porter? I gave the address. Don't move. I'm coming. The line clicked dead. Not rude, decisive. I climbed out of the shed, locked the hatch, and sat on the back steps with the rain working the hood of my jacket. The yard breathed slowly. The house held its own lungs. My phone showed no new messages, which somehow felt like permission. I watched the cul-de-sac for headlights and counted my heartbeat against the storm. Henry's note was warm against my back pocket. The motel receipt was a stiff square in my wallet. Between them, a line I could actually follow. For once, the waiting felt like action, the kind you don't brag about but remember. I didn't pray. I didn't drink. I didn't call anyone. I listened to Rain on Pine and told myself one thing on repeat. Do not move. Headlights finally cut the wet. A badge flashed. The clock in my chest reset. She was taller than I pictured. Jacket dark, voice steady. "Show me." We crossed the wet grass. I unlocked the shed and lifted the hatch. Cold air rose up like a promise. Torres slipped on gloves and took the ladder first, sure-footed. "Don't touch anything else," she said without looking back. In the light, she scanned everything fast. Photos, ledgers, the metal cabinets. Then she started documenting. Phone out, quick shots of labels, spines, serial numbers. "Date, time," she murmured, more to the record than to me. She pulled a notebook, printed my name, the address, and began the chain of custody log, neat block letters, no emotion. When I handed her the first cassette, she wrote the label exactly as printed, initialed, slipped it into a clear bag, heat-sealed the top with a portable wand. Another tape, another seal. The room sounded like soft plastic and discipline. She set aside the player, photographed its scuffs and sticker, noted the outlet, the power strip, even the dust on the shelf. Nothing gets to be just dust in rooms like this. She paused over a drawer marked Meridian. Internal. Read a page, read it again, exhaled through her nose. "This can open Rico," she said, not as a dream, as math. I didn't realize I'd been holding breath until my ribs ached. She looked at the table, at the order Henry carved from fear, and said quieter, like a verdict. "Your uncle was brilliant." For the first time in months, something inside me stood up straight. There's a lie men my age carry like a spare rib. Men don't break. We lift. We fix. We keep the roof from leaking and the lights from flickering, and when something caves in, we say it's fine and carry on. In that cold room under Henry's shed, I finally said it plain. I broke. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet. Like a beam that's been taking weight too long. I sat at the work table and wrote a timeline in pencil. The first time Ryan borrowed a tool and never gave it back. Laura's girls' trip that lined up with a Meridian summit. The day my mother started coming home late. The night she didn't come home at all. Dates sharpened into nails. The list took shape like framing. Studs, joists, braces, something you can hang a case on. Here's what else I wrote. Silence is a verdict. It doesn't wait for a judge. It decides you. If I kept quiet, Moss won, Laura won, the rain won, and the next man like me would be taught to swallow it too. I opened my wallet and pulled out the NDA Laura shoved at me months ago. Clean language, dirty intent. I read it once more just to taste the insult, then touched a flame to the corner. The paper curled, blackened, and fell into a metal tray Henry used for screws. Men don't break? Maybe. But I've learned something better. When we do, we get to rebuild. Our way. Torres moved like a carpenter who knows which beam matters. She drafted a witness list, former Meridian staff who vanished after asking the wrong questions, contractors who billed twice, a lab tech who saved emails to herself on Sundays, subpoenas, warrants, rolled out with judge's ink still wet. The archive got sealed, tagged, and logged so tightly even dust needed clearance. She called for protective detail. Plain cars, plain clothes, plain faces, but the message was loud. No accidents on rainy nights. She told me what to not do. Don't brag, don't tip friends, don't send long texts after midnight. Leaks don't need enemies, they need loneliness. I nodded, because I'd learned that lesson the hard way. We set up a burn phone. She gave me a script for reporters. No comment. She gave me a script for myself. Eat, sleep, write. The case was a machine now. One I could feed with facts and starve of drama. Late, after she left, I walked the line of file cabinets like a man checking locks before bed. Outside, the cul-de-sac was a dark bowl. Inside, my phone buzzed once. No name, no photo. Stop digging. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a weather report from people who think they control the sky. I took a photo of the message, saved it to the log, and powered the phone off. Henry left me a map. Torres gave me roads, and someone out there just confirmed we're on target. Torres brought in a forensic accountant. Quiet guy, sleeves rolled, eyes that see numbers like tire tracks. He started with the obvious, a charitable foundation Moss loved to mention in interviews. Grants for community health, glossy pamphlets, smiling kids in stock photos. Underneath, money moved like water through rock. The foundation paid a property services firm, which paid a trust, which paid for a vacation house with ocean views and a cedar hot tub registered to no one you can shake hands with. He opened a folder labeled LLC, the kind you can buy online with a credit card and a lie. The owner of the owner of the owner kept looping back to the same mailbox in Delaware. Then he slid over a calendar printout, tea times and golf dues. Moss partnered up with the same 3 initials that popped on property tax checks. He drew a simple line: charity, shell, trust, beach house. Another line: Moss, shell, political donations, labeled community partnerships. He circled a last name where the lines met and tapped the paper once, polite like a knock. Cunningham. I read it twice. Judge Robert Cunningham. The man who told me to keep emotions out of it had a private door in the same house Moss bought with other people's pain. Puzzle pieces don't click. They snap. The room sounded like that snap. I didn't need coffee. I needed a verdict with teeth. I went back through my court file like a man rereading his own obituary. Hearings moved out of order, scheduled fast, then faster, like someone knew how many steps were in a dance and cut the ones that didn't flatter them. Torres pulled the donation records, Cunningham's re-election committee getting community partnership checks from a charity that never hosted a picnic. Then we set Ryan's testimony against the docket. He swore I'd been unpredictable the week before the hearing, but the timestamp on his security badge had him in Meridian's office prepping with legal. The audio of him calling me a liability played in my head while my marriage got priced out like a used truck. Laura's performance looked different on rewatch. How her crying came right after objections sustained in her favor. How she avoided specifics, using words that sound like truth and float like steam. Thin, quick, gone. The transcripts made it plain. Terms were hammered into shape around a story I didn't write. Not justice. Logistics. The same logistics from the tapes, the ledgers, the beach house deed. I closed the folder and said it once, for the record, and for the part of me still asking what I did wrong. Divorce was a tool, not a failure, a lever. They pulled it, and everything I built came loose. Now I knew where the fulcrum sat, and who paid for it. I woke to my name Breaking Bad on 3 sites I used to read over coffee. Sources say James Porter is unstable, one headline purred, like it knew me better than my own mirror. A second site ran a spliced clip of me leaving court, sound cranked so my breath sounded like a growl. A third stacked hashtags until it looked like a dog pile. Protector, #unstable_X, #believe women. Slogans I respect, twisted into handcuffs for the wrong man. The comments came like bottle caps, cheap and sharp. Strangers diagnosed me from a thumbnail. Someone with a courage of an egg avatar DM'd me a route home and a promise to finish what the crash started. Meridian didn't need to win in court. It needed me toxic in public. So I did the one thing Panic hates. I took my time. I pulled the raw video, checked the metadata, and traced the outburst to a cut that shaved my words into something I never said. I posted the original file with timestamps, XF, geotags, each line a nail in the coffin of the lie. Then I did the same to 2 more clips. I didn't rant. I uploaded, captioned with a sentence a carpenter would understand. Measure twice, cut once. The share counter climbed. A few comments turned. Truth doesn't trend fast, but it stains. Meridian wanted a caricature. I handed it a receipt. And receipts do not blink. 2 days later, Laura sat under soft lights on a podcast designed to make hard stories sound like warm tea. She wore a cardigan the color of forgiveness and spoke in a voice that curled at the edges. He was controlling, she said. I was scared. The host leaned in. The music sighed. A tissue appeared on the table like a magic trick. Laura's tears were budgeted to the second. She talked about emotional volatility, boundary issues, and walking on eggshells, and never once said a date, a place, a time. The comments went rabid in sympathy. A woman wrote that my eyes looked mean even when I smiled. A man wrote that men like me never change. I let the clip run to its last violin, then opened Henry's binder to the page that broke fate's back. Meridian Summit. Beige ballroom. My mother between Laura and Ryan. 2 years before my wedding. Name tags like little billboards. Catherine Porter. Laura Harris. Ryan Blake. I pulled the scanned photo, the timestamp, and the film scan data Henry had annotated like scripture, and posted them with one plain caption: "First time we met." No hashtags, no speech, just a picture that didn't blink and a clock in the corner that didn't lie. If her story needed fog, mine needed daylight. The view count jumped. The comments wobbled. You could hear the hinge move, the moment strangers start to realize a narrative is a product and they've been sold. He picked a bar we used to like: dim, cheap whiskey, sports reruns on mute. The text said, "Let's talk like men." I went because men like me don't hide. We document. He was already there, elbows on varnish, apology ready-made and half-cooked. "I messed up, brother," he said, eyes glossy but dry. The speech hit all the stations: stress, confusion, love, how things just happened. Then he moved to the deal. If I cool it online, he'll help me get right. Maybe a payout, maybe an introduction, maybe nothing. I asked dates, names. Who told him to show up at my house that Tuesday? He slid the answers like a card sharp, quick when easy, evasive when it mattered. Every time the truth got close, he batted it away with a memory or a laugh. I nodded, let him talk, and let the mic under my collar drink it in. He kept saying we, like guilt was a team sport. He said he'd coordinate. He mentioned a briefing. He said legal. The words went into the recorder as clean as ice and glass. I finished my soda, signed the receipt, and placed it on the bar where the timestamp could see daylight. Then I stood. "We're done," I said. He reached like he wanted to touch my shoulder. I let air be the answer. I walked out without looking back, the door catching my reflection for a second. A man who finally learned to leave evidence wherever he goes. The next morning, Torres turned up with folders and a jaw set to work. Subpoenas went out like nails from a pneumatic gun. Meridian's servers, vendor contracts, visitor logs, CCTV from every door that required a badge. The backup array came first, a mirror where lazy criminals forget they've been tidy. Then the purge logs: who deleted what, when, and which admin credentials did the deed. Security cameras gave us the faces behind the emails. People in suits who always arrive 5 minutes early. People who carry nothing in and leave with Manila. People who turn their badges away from the lens like it's a superstition. Torres marked time codes, cross-referenced Wi-Fi pings, drew straight lines that men like Moss think don't exist. We mapped exits and elevators, noted which doors stick, which corridors have blind corners. She laid out a raid plan like a blueprint. Teams, angles, rooms that swallow sound. This was no TV sting. It was framing done right so the wall doesn't fall when you hang weight on it. By late afternoon, the accountant pinged an internal calendar. Incident review. Confri B, 7:30 a.m. Invite only, recurring, no minutes attached. The names on it matched the tapes, the shell companies, the judge's donor list. Torres didn't smile. She checked her watch and said, "They're about to meet about the mess they made." I felt it in my teeth. The current before a storm hits timber. Countdown started. The email came from a burn account with 3 words in the subject line: "I can help." No greeting, just a time and a location. Top floor of a downtown parking garage where the wind works through your coat. I went because the clock was already ticking. She was there first, back to the city, hands jammed in the pockets of a raincoat too thin for the air. Dr. Sarah Chin. I knew the name from Henry's files, the research memos, the initials on lab approvals. She didn't waste courtesy. "You don't know me, Mr. Porter, but I know Laura," she said, and the way she shaped my wife's name told me history lived on the underside. "She was placed near you for a reason. Your mother got close." Her eyes kept moving. Stairs, elevator, roofline, like she understood how fear builds a map. She spoke about trial logs and audits that never closed, about pressure to tidy data that bled too much truth. I asked why now. She said sometimes a dam gives because the hairline crack never healed. Then she slid a small USB across the concrete. It was taped in gauze like a wound. "A start, not all," she said. "I'm not a hero. I'm done being quiet." Before I could ask for the rest, she stepped away and swallowed herself into the stairwell. The stick in my pocket felt heavier than it should. Another line on the ledger. Another reason to finish what I started. The hit came where they like to swing. Procedure. Meridian's lawyers stood on cable news and said our hash values didn't match on a duplicated tape file. Possible tampering, they purred, and the media did what media does. It asked loud questions and squinted at the math. A defense briefing leaked an hour later, full of diagrams and confidence, pointing at gaps that weren't gaps so much as air between rungs. Time got narrow. Torres called from a number I didn't save. "We need to neutralize this," she said. "Prove provenance, original device, or we risk bleed." I could hear movement behind her. Paper, wheels, a printer chewing on forms. The case was a machine. This was a thrown bolt. I looked around Henry's archive like a man who knows the answer is in the room. Photos, ledgers, the cassette player, the player, scuffed edges, a crooked sticker from a repair shop I remember from childhood runs for ice cream. I bent close. There it was, a service seal with date and initials, stamped 4 months before my mother's crash. The number on it matched the receipt taped in Henry's binder. I called Torres back. "We have the deck," I said. "Stamped. Pre-incident. Chain holds." She exhaled like a carpenter hearing a stud bite clean. "Good. Bring it. Carefully." They wanted doubt to cloud the glass. Instead, we found the pain that proved the house was real. Rain came hard enough to blur street signs and make the wipers beg. I parked crooked by the shed because time suddenly mattered again. The first lock turned, then the secondary lock Henry added for the part of him that never slept. The hatch groaned open. The air below was clean and cold, like a walk-in full of truth. I went straight to the back shelf and slid out a wooden crate that still smelled like oil and sawdust. Inside, the cassette deck, scuffed corners, a crooked repair shop sticker I recognized from childhood Saturdays, and a repair receipt folded to the size of a prayer. Dates, initials, serial numbers. I lifted the deck and felt the weight that says original, not copy. On the bottom, a postal stamp from when Henry shipped it for service, months before the crash. Red ink sunk into fiber like it meant to live forever. I photographed everything twice, then once more for the part of me that doubts by reflex. The ladder complained on the way up. Torres met me at the door, eyes on the crate, hand already in a glove. She checked the sticker, the receipt, the stamp, then set the deck down like a loaded verdict. Her shoulders let go half an inch. "We're back in," she said. Not relief, resolution. For the first time in days, the rain felt like rinse, not threat. The chain held. The clock could start again on our terms. I left Henry Street and turned onto the highway, rain grinding the glass into gray. A black sedan slipped off a merge and settled 2 car lengths back, steady as a habit. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. I tested it. A lane change without a signal, then another with one. The sedan tucked in like a shadow that paid attention. The road bent exactly like the one where my mother died. Same shallow curve, same forest pressing close, same low guardrail pretending to matter. A slick sheen lifted off the asphalt and my tires hydroplaned, half a breath of drift and spin, until traction bit and the wheel answered again. My heartbeat pounded against the seatbelt. The rear view held 2 white eyes of headlights, too calm for weather. I took the next incline fast and made a choice I'd once call reckless but now call record-keeping. On the bridge, I yanked into the shoulder, slammed to a stop, and hit the hazards. Flash, flash. The world went strobe. I pulled my phone, opened the camera, flipped it rear-facing, and held it steady out the driver window. The sedan rolled past slow enough to read the dent near the plate, slow enough to know I'd seen it. The footage saved to the cloud before my pulse came down. I narrated a timestamp, a location, a weather note, evidence with a pulse. Then I merged back in and let the river take the rest of the noise. Some nights echo old ones on purpose. This one did, and I didn't blink. The email wore a suit even in plain text. A lawyer I'd never met offered terms that sounded like a lullaby. Comprehensive resolution, no admission, finality. The number had 8 figures and a decimal that felt like a hand on the back of my neck. The silence clause was the spine. No tapes, no photos, no interviews, no public disparagement. They promised security too. Cars, doors, men with earpieces. They translated danger into amenities. They offered to convert my life into a safe room. I read every line like it was a trap, because it was. Freedom measured in hush money isn't freedom, it's inventory. The contract tried to turn grief into a consulting fee and my mother into a rounding error. My phone vibrated under the table. Torres. Do not respond. Forward to me. I didn't. Not yet. Men like me like to look a thing in the mouth before we set it on fire. I pictured the garage where Dr. Chin shoved courage into my pocket. I pictured the bridge where I stared fear down with a blinking hazard light. I pictured room 14, paper receipt sharp as a tooth in my wallet. Then I wrote back one sentence. No greeting, no sign-off. Money clears debts, not a mother's blood. I CC'd Torres and archived the rest. The offer didn't insult me, it defined us. They buy storms. I build houses that stand in them. They came again, bigger teeth. A deep fake of my voice, the vowels stretched, clipped into a threat I never said. A second video, spliced, made a shove out of me catching a door with my elbow. The hashtags ran hot, louder than before, like a crowd that likes the sound of its own echo. Hash protector, hash stop James, hash pattern of abuse. I didn't chase it with throat or fists. I brought receipts. I pulled the original files and posted the full cut with EXIF data, timestamps, and the camera's serial, then cross-matched the upload hashes to public checksums. I streamed a short live debunk, screen-shared the metadata, held still while the cursor did the talking. Calm is a blade if you keep it sharp. Then I dropped the anchor, a photo Henry logged, time-coded to the minute, geotagged inside Meridian's old annex. It showed Laura at a workstation the same hour she claimed she was hiding at a friend's, terrified of me. The badge log mirrored the time. The Wi-Fi handshake fed the same minute stamp. I said 12 words, slow enough to land. Her location says Meridian. Her story says fear. Only one is true. The comments lurched. Some dug in, some cracked. You could feel the room tilt. The moment performance meets provenance and loses. They trade in noise. I trade in time, place, proof. News breaks different when you helped load the gun. I watched the feed on a cracked TV in a diner off I-5 while the real thing unfolded 20 miles north. FBI windbreakers poured through Meridian's glass doors, a blue river against chrome. Agents rolled out bankers' boxes like they were moving day for the truth. Another crew wheeled racks to the server room, cloning arrays humming, LEDs marching, a clean copy of the place's lies go to sleep. Outside, employees gathered in little weatherproof herds, ID badges turned backward, arms folded, phones out. Some looked angry, some looked relieved in a way they didn't understand yet. HR tried to count heads and failed. PR rehearsed statements that would age like milk. The camera panned to the executive floor, blinds down, doors shut, a kingdom pretending it still had a king. Reporters barked questions at a lobby that never answers. The Chiron invented verbs. The anchor tried to look calm and still sell adrenaline. My phone buzzed. Torres. No greeting. Moss at home. Warrant served. The fork went quiet in my hand. You can laugh without smiling. What I felt was that. Not joy. Alignment. I paid in cash, left the receipt in the pocket like I always do now, and stepped into a rain that felt less like weather and more like rinsing. They wanted me unstable. Instead, I was steady, watching the empire pretend it wasn't crumbling on live TV. Next, you go for the men who think they're too friendly to fall. They took him at the PR office, where the walls are white and the lies have dimmers. He was in a blazer he saves for launch days, collar clean, hair perfect, camera ready even when the camera wasn't on his side. 2 agents walked him out, hands behind his back, handcuffs bright as truth in fluorescent light. The press had been tipped by somebody who likes overtime. Mics lunged. Ryan, did you coordinate testimony? Ryan, were you paid by Meridian during the divorce? He tried that old half-smile that used to work on waiters and wives. It didn't land. His lawyer did the talking. No comment. Over and over, a rain of nothing. For a second, his eyes found me across the sidewalk. Not surprise, not guilt. Something thinner, fear trying to learn how to behave. He looked at the cameras again and straightened like PR can posture a man out of a felony. I didn't say a word. I let the boxes and servers and timestamps do the speaking. The agents eased him into the car like cargo, not company. Door shut, window up. Reflection gave me back a man who doesn't bluff anymore. As they pulled away, he mouthed 4 words through glass and ego. This isn't over. He's right. It isn't. But for once, the end of something won't be mine. They took her in a coffee shop with soft lamps and reclaimed wood, one of those places where the foam has art and the music forgives everything. She wore a sweater meant to make people trust her. When the agent stepped in, she did what she's good at. She cried. Not wailing, just enough to turn every head and bend every heart that still wants the world to be simple. They read her rights. She nodded small, looked smaller. Her lawyer arrived in a hurry and found a microphone before he found his client. "My client fears for her safety," he said. "She's been emotionally abused." The words floated and stuck like steam on a cold window. Outside, the sidewalk split into teams. Some said believe her. Some said look again. The comments lit like kindling, hashtags arguing with each other, people writing novels under a stranger's face. I stood across the street with my hands in my jacket and listened to something that cut through the street noise. Her voice on Henry's tape, calm and efficient, discussing approvals like tides and me like a tool. Two Lauras, one behind glass with tears, one in a file that doesn't blink. I said nothing. No speech, no victory lap, no sermon. The only sound I needed was the paper crackle of the warrant and the soft click of handcuffs built for wrists exactly like hers. Sometimes the truest thing a man can say is silence. I let it stand. The beach house looked like a magazine ad. Cedar siding, steel cable rails, gulls that don't care who you are. On paper, it belonged to a shell that belonged to a trust that belonged to air. The bank statements called payments donations, always just shy of round numbers, always after rulings that kept Meridian clean. The emails were worse. Meetups that smelled like favors, calendar blocks labeled community, where deals learned to dress as kindness. Reporters did the part of the job that still works. They stacked documents into headlines. They walked the camera up the driveway and let the address read itself. By noon, a statement leaked with the tone of a man who thinks the exit is still dignified. By 2, Cunningham resigned. That night, a clerk with a tired voice called my name into a phone that suddenly felt heavier. "Mr. Porter," she said, "per order of review, your divorce decree is vacated." The word hit like a clean nail biting into fresh stud. Final, square, true. The same judge who told me to keep my feelings out of it had kept his hands in it the whole time. I didn't cheer. I didn't toast. I sat at my table, put the letter next to the motel receipt, and let the two pieces of paper talk to each other, bottom and beginning. Justice isn't loud. It's a quiet click when a crooked hinge finally lines up and the door swings the way it should. The prosecutor's office smelled like coffee that forgot to quit. Conference room glass, dry erase ghosts of plans that worked and plans that didn't. They sat me at a long table with binders stacked like cinder blocks. Names became witnesses. The lab tech who saved Sunday emails to herself, the auditor who got benched after asking for raw data, a driver who remembered a certain sedan leaving the lot late on the wrong night. They walked me through the timeline, lines, dots, pins. My mother's last week, Laura's badge swipes, Ryan's calendar, Moss's flights that land just before storms. Rehearsal felt like tightening bolts. Where to breathe, what to answer, what not to guess. "Facts, not feelings," the ADA said, tapping her pen once per word. I wrote that down even though it already lived in my bones. Security plans got thicker. New routes in, new routes out, parking that doesn't repeat. Someone from Protective Detail showed me how to look over a shoulder without turning my head. It wasn't paranoia, it was insurance. By evening, the whiteboard was a city map of cause and effect. Maria stood back, arms folded, reading silence like subtitles. She glanced at me, then at the table we'd turned into a machine. "We have enough to win," she said, and the room exhaled. Then she added, almost kind, almost warning, "Don't gloat yet." I didn't. I went home, set my motel receipt beside the vacated letter, and slept like a man who knows morning has work. Courtrooms have a smell. Old wood, lemon cleaner, and judgment. I took my seat in the back row and watched the jury study everything without moving much at all. The clerk read the caption like a tolling bell. Then the screen came alive and the room shifted from belief to evidence. Henry's deck clacked, speakers warmed, and the original tape rolled. No overdub, no static trimmed. Moss's voice wasn't loud, it was inevitable. "Make it look like a rainy night accident. No one coughed. No one rustled. The sentence hung in the air like a steel beam you can't pretend not to see. The government pinned the timeline to the wall. Storm data, maintenance logs, the route my mother drove, the text Ryan sent 10 minutes before she left work. Then they cross-referenced emails, approvals stamped at 6:12 and all set at 6:19, an expense line for transport that never had a truck. The accountant traced money the way a hunter reads snow. Finally, the summit photo. My mother between Laura and Ryan, 2 years before my destiny. A frame that told the truth better than any oath. The prosecutor didn't narrate. She just let the clock in the corner do its job. For 2 seconds, the courtroom forgot to breathe. Not fear, not awe, the sound of a lie losing its funding. I didn't look at Moss. I watched the jurors write something down they couldn't erase later. The beam was set. The wall would hold. It hit mid-morning. Whispers at counsel table, brows knitting, a note up to the bench. Word leaked fast as cold air. A juror got a threat. 2 lines, no signature. Vote wrong, you won't get home. The judge called a halt. The room held its breath and its temper. Defense wanted a mistrial, said the well's poisoned. The prosecutor asked for 5 minutes and an IT guy with a pulse. They traced the IP while we stood in that strange church silence. First hop, second hop, a detour through a phone farm. It pointed to a contract shop that sells noise for a fee. Bot accounts, burner numbers, intimidation packaged like snack food. Torres leaned over, voice low. Third-party smear. Outsourced spine. The judge read the report, jaw set, temper colder than the marble. He called the juror back, asked the right questions. Can you still be fair? Can you ignore this? The juror said yes with the kind of steady people don't practice. They earn it. Defense pushed again. The judge lifted a hand. The trial stands, he said, and the words rang clean. He ordered extra protection for the panel and told counsel to watch their corners. We reset clocks, we reset chairs, we reset hearts. I sat back down with my hands flat on my knees and felt the floor lock under me. They tried to knock the table over. We nailed another leg. The witness list had a hole where a name should have been. Natalie, the friendly shadow who poured Laura's wine and testified like a metronome, pulled out the night before. Safety concerns, her lawyer said. Translation: the story frayed where money couldn't mend it. The prosecutor tightened her stack, but I saw it, the gap where a clean line should be. Then a door opened, and Dr. Sarah Chin walked in like a decision. No makeup, no PR smile, a spine built from nights she didn't sleep. She raised her right hand, swore in, and set a small encrypted drive on the rail. Chain of custody established, she said, and then she showed it. Original trial logs, unsanitized, with edits tracked by initials that mattered. RM, RH, a string we'd seen on expense lines and beach deeds. Baselines moved, adverse events renamed, dates rethreaded to please a forecast. Defense tried to knock her sideways. Credential snipes, process nitpicks. Why now? She didn't blink. Because the truth didn't get smaller after I looked away, she said, and because I have a daughter who asks what I do for work. Then she looked at Moss, and for the first time in months I watched a king hear a human speak without permission. Her voice softened, and it hit harder. I won't bury another daughter for a bonus. In the gallery, pens paused mid-scratch. Torres's mouth made a line that meant good. I felt something strong and simple rise in my chest. Not triumph. Permission. The kind that lets a man finish what he started. They threaded the day like wire through studs. First, Henry's tape. The voices, the plan, the phrase about a rainy night accident hanging there like a sign you can't tear down. Then Dr. Chin's drive. Raw lab logs, edit histories, initials on changes that matched the men who signed paychecks. The prosecutor laid them side by side and let the math talk. Timestamps matched, emails sent at 6:12, data corrected at 6:19, Moss confirming at 6:23, my mother leaving the lot at 6:31. She pinned approval emails under each time, then drew a line to an incentive pool, bonus payments landing inside the same hour the data got clean and the risk got buried. The accountant stepped up and translated greed into ledger. Line items labeled performance alignment. Money routed through shells that don't own chairs, only influence. Defense tried to fog the clock. Time zones, server drift, human error. The prosecutor just clicked a slide. NTP sync logs, audit trails, the kind of boring truth that wins wars. The wall of screen looked like a heartbeat. Two independent curves, rising together, falling together, never once out of phase. She set the clicker down. Two independent sources. Same truth. No drama, just a carpenter checking level and finding plumb. In the bench light, I felt something in my skull finally stop rattling. Not joy. Alignment. When two lines match, you don't argue with them. You build on them. The jury filed in with faces that knew what they carried. Guilty, the foreperson said, once, twice, 17 times. The words landed like hammers in fresh wood. The judge stacked the numbers. Moss, 23 years. Ryan, 15. Laura, 8 on a plea with more talking to do. Outside of criminal court, the civil blade came down. Meridian fined $2.7 billion. Shackled to federal monitors for 15 years so no one could call the next storm mercy. There wasn't cheering. There was something better. A pressure change you feel in your teeth when weather breaks. Reporters swarmed, microphones hunting hot takes. I let the tape and the math keep speaking. A man in a suit asked how it felt. I said, accurate. That afternoon, a clerk in a voice like a burned-out bulb read me a letter over the phone, then sent it by courier. An official apology, my case reviewed, vacated, the court acknowledging a bench that took the wrong side of the ledger, paper, signature, seal. I set it next to the room 14 receipt, bottom and beginning. People think catharsis is fireworks. For me, it was a chair that finally stopped wobbling. It was sleep without the thud in my chest. It was the first morning in months I didn't reach for proof to remember who I was. They tried to buy silence, rent fear, and sell fate. We paid cash for truth, and it held. I signed papers in a room that didn't smell like lemon cleaner or panic. Porter Foundation, inked clean, money pointed at whistleblowers who keep receipts when the world begs them not to. We rented a small office with floors that creak honest. On the wall, I hung 2 frames, my mother, eyes steady, Henry, tired but bright. Under them, a shelf with binders labeled like his, dates, names, math. In my wallet, behind the health card and the spare key that opens nothing now, I still carry room 14's receipt. The paper's gone soft at the fold, but the ink hasn't budged. When a man tells me there's no point pushing back, I press that edge and remember the smell of that room, the taste of cheap coffee, the feeling of being left for scrap, and of not staying there. On the office door, I had a plate engraved, truth or nothing, not a slogan, a budget. It tells me what we fund and what we walk past. The first case file sits open, elastic still tight, a nurse with emails, a vendor with ledgers, a man with a hard drive and shaking hands. Different company, same shape of rot. People ask about forgiveness. Here's what I know now. Forgiveness without truth is just silence with perfume. We don't sell scent here. We keep records. We build walls square. And we open the next folder when the phone rings.